A warm welcome to our policy podcast, Building Wealth, Building Community, hosted by Duncan and Andy from the Social Enterprise Scotland policy team. Social enterprises and other types of inclusive democratic business models are building a better economy across urban and rural Scotland. We'll be talking about some of the big policy issues of the day and, crucially, the real-world impacts in our local communities.
Hello, welcome back. This is the Building Wealth, Building Community, a Social Enterprise Scotland podcast with me, Andy Patterson.
And me, Duncan Thorpe.
And our special guest today are Creative Dundee, where we have two guests today. We have
Gillian Easson, Director of Creative Dundee.
And Eilish Victoria, Creative Producer at Creative Dundee.
Welcome along today, guys. Thank you very much for taking up the opportunity to come speak with us. Really do appreciate it. I think it's a great opportunity for people to get to know some of our members and for our members to kind of get out there and speak about the stuff that they're doing on the ground.
Thank you for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no problem at all. So firstly, guys, would you just like to describe what is Creative Dundee? Where did it come from? What's the little story behind it all?
So Creative Dundee is a network organisation that centres creative communities as essential catalysts for collective good and citywide growth. And we started off as a blog many years ago, and we've built from there into becoming a social enterprise in 2013. A charity in 2025. And now what we do is a range of projects. We have a number of events, and we have our digital platform, which is essentially our venue. And so, we're all about trying to ensure that creativity is essential to how Dundee and Scotland moves forward right now.
And I'd see Dundee's pretty central to when we talk about kind of creativity in Scotland as well. I think it's getting much more well known for its creativity and its arts background. As someone who lives in Glasgow, I know Glasgow will fight very fiercely to be like, oh no, we're the culture and we're the arts centre in the world. But actually, Dundee's kind of punching above its weight, I'd argue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dundee is it's got incredible energy. We're here tuning in from a degree show. Actually, we're just in a small room off of Duncan Jordanson's degree show, so it's buzzing outside, and it is like that genuinely all year round in Dundee. We became a UNESCO City of Design, so we're the only UK City of Design in the UNESCO portfolio, so we've got a really strong design scene. We've got the only Victoria and Albert Museum outside of London. We've got an incredible kind of contemporary arts, grassroots, DIY scene. I do often compare Dundee and Glasgow to be quite similar in terms of social geography and demographics, but also that really grassrootsy art scene. It's DIY and it's really vibrant, and that's why we essentially set up, was to try and amplify that because it wasn't being done anywhere else. And that's why I'm still here, is because of that really edgy scene.
Yeah, and I suppose it's kind of, it's very creatively dense, and we've got so many creative courses in the city. We've got a couple of universities, college courses, and so I think we figured out there's well more than 500 creative graduates graduating in Dundee each year. And lots of them stick around in the kind of grassroots spaces that Gillian mentioned.
And they go out into the city, it's not just like there's one area of the city that is really creative. I think there's a lot of crossover, of course, between kind of social activism and creativity. So there's a lot of brilliant work happening on the ground right across Dundee that's been led by designers and artists and creative communities. And so increasingly over the years, and particularly as COVID happened, Creative Dundee moved more into that space of like, how do we bring more resource into the city to distribute to artists and designers who are doing great work on the ground in terms of healthcare or social and environmental justice. And so that's the kind of vibe of Dundee right now.
Well, it's great to know, because I think a lot of people can think if they come into Scotland, it's like you have Edinburgh versus Glasgow, and that's it. But I think Dundee, again, has been pushing above its weight, and that's one of the reasons that we'll be hosting our Social Enterprise Summit is in Dundee on June the 17th, which is a very small plug there. But you guys have been set up in Dundee for a while. How has the kind of city changed? How's the organisation changed kind of during that time?
So, Dundee, I'm from Dundee, and it is a classic kind of post-industrial city. it's got a lot of challenges, but it's got lots of opportunities as well. So, we know the statistics about how many people are living in poverty right now. It's really terrifying, and that's only increasing with the cost of living crisis. But the energy that's come from, the mills, people working in the mills, to working in the factories, to then establishing new businesses and new industrial patterns, I suppose, has meant that culture has been really rooted in these communities. And so you've got this really vibrant city. I think it does like to think of itself as the underdog. And how Creative Dundee has changed to that is that we've really had to respond to the city's needs over the years. So yeah, as I say, we started out as a blog, we started running some events, realised there was lots of people out there that really wanted to come together and find that sense of belonging and community with each other. And now what we do is, a range of projects across the city that root creativity, and Eilish will, I'm sure, speak about our creative space work. But we also have things like our crowdsourced guide to the city, which has become the guide of choice by venues in the city. So it's a little crowdsourced guide called 99 Things to See and Do. We basically go out to the public and ask, what are the things that you love to see and do and explore in the city? And then we collate it into a little guide that, thousands of this little guide go out across the city. And I think what it really does is demonstrates the sort of co-design potential of us working with the residents of the city. And people just want to get stuck in because they love the place that they live in. They're really proud of the place. So that's the kind of work we do. We're working on a big creative networks project just now about how to support emerging and established creative networks across Scotland. So we're working with Creative Scotland on that. We also do a lot of digital original content, so making sure that we are a mirror being reflected back of the city. So putting a spotlight on, particularly on marginalised communities and independents who don't often show up in economic data, and perhaps we can come back to that. Really trying to surface the incredible knowledge, expertise, businesses, independence across the city. And creative spaces is a big programme for us just now.
Yeah, so I started working with Creative Dundee a few years ago to try and address the issue of a lack of creative space in the city, and that was kind of clear to the Creative Dundee team through all the different projects that Creative Dundee were doing. Key feedback from folks was just a lack of access to space, and that space to kind of make work, share work, or sell work, and collaborate with other people as well. So there is existing space in the city, of course, but even they are kind of struggling just through kind of short leases, having to rely on kind of volunteers to run those spaces, and not able to invest in those spaces because of the short leases as well.
So something I was going to ask there is you've kind of hit across three different pillars almost, as you're talking about kind of the community, talking about the art space, and you're talking about kind of tackling poverty as well. So within those kind of three ambitions, was that maybe a reason that kind of the social enterprise model was quite attractive to set up to in the first place, or is it just kind of something that you stumble upon? People's journeys into social enterprise are all very different.
Yeah. I better answer this, I suppose. I was kind of fed up that actually, there was maybe just once a year that creativity was reported in the local press, for example, and knew that there was lots of grassroots activity happening year round. So that was one reason. Another reason that we set up the blog originally was that there was an economic recession happening at that time, and I knew that a number of small independent creative businesses were having to close down. And then also I was based in Dundee, but working all over the place elsewhere, and I needed to build that community. So there was a bunch of different reasons that we set it up, but the reason that we became a social enterprise was ultimately, it was very much it was a purpose-led organisation. We didn't want to be reliant on charitable income solely at all at that stage. And so we started by trading, which I think was quite unusual, speaking to other charities that also have a social enterprise part of their business, was that we became a social enterprise first and then became a charity later. But we have a range of different income streams that help us work towards our overall target each year, and it's tough, but I'm really glad that we are a social enterprise. And I think over the years, it's just been wonderful to see, well, particularly through the work of organisations like Social Enterprise Scotland, it's just been wonderful to see the understanding of social enterprises, because I think certainly when I started out, it was like, you're what? So it's definitely advanced even in the last 10 years, which I'm pretty much marking 10 years of kind of working with the organisation this year. So yeah, shout out to people like organisations like Social Enterprise Scotland.
But we couldn't do it without our members, and I think that's something that we should really emphasise here. It's our luck and privilege really to be working with people who are on the ground, are thinking about different ways of supporting their communities and thinking that, the economy doesn't work for us. Let's try and change that, and let's try and do a different model that actually works for people.
I just want to ask something, I suppose, about economic contribution, because you mentioned the economy briefly there, and I kind of thought, well, I think people don't really understand the power that the creative sector has in the economy, I think, as well. So I don't know if you could just talk a bit about that as well, not just local level, national level maybe as well, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, the creative industries are a really big part of Scotland's economy, and certainly in Dundee, they're the leading sector, the leading growth sector by turnover. And I think it was roughly £353 million of turnover in 2022, and employing like 3,500 people here locally. So it's a really important sector, and that is, of course, across Scotland, and it's part of the National Economic Transformation Plan. I can never get the words the right way around, but you know that. So, but also it's really hard to be a creative business on the ground right now, right? So you can be a sole trader, a freelancer, or you can have a micro business, which makes up the broad majority of creative businesses in Scotland. I think over 50% of creative businesses in Scotland have 0 employees, so they're really small micro businesses. And sometimes the support structures don't work for small independents. So what we found, and certainly the research that we recently commissioned through the Creative Networks project, what is shown has been that the everyday infrastructure that supports creative businesses are creative networks often, and organisations that are doing what might be seen as the soft stuff, the kind of bringing together of community. But it's incredibly important for a sector that is reliant often on local supply chains. And that's why we think that creative businesses, cultural organisations, so creative industries and culture, are really central to Scotland achieving the Community Wealth Building Act now.
I think that's a really important message to get across to the policymakers as well. Obviously, we have a new government, new parliament. So I think it's just, really talking about the economic contribution to creative industries is huge, as you said. And it's like, we just need to get that message across, don't we, to say invest in our industry, and you will get a big economic return from that as well. Again, it's like not all about the economy, of course, but in terms of the policymakers and the politicians, that's kind of what they want to hear. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's a job for us, collectively, as Social Enterprise Scotland with our members to really get that message across.
So it's really easy to kind of say these things and talk about, oh, you need to do this for the economy. But you guys are actually doing that on the ground, because I think something that people don't necessarily think about all the time is, oh, where's their space to do that? So is there something maybe about the kind of the space that's needed in our cities and in our communities?
Yeah, so we've been working for the last few years with Dundee's creative communities, trying to kind of better understand the barriers to accessing creative space. And as I say, even just like sustaining and keeping running existing spaces. And I suppose trying to develop a bit of a collective vision on what the future of Dundee might look like if we had more creative spaces, and what that might achieve, more broadly across the city. So, and then we took on a vacant unit within Dundee City Centre in February 2024. And that was a space to kind of test some of the ideas that had come out of that first year's worth of work. So we had some co-working, lots of events, workshops, and we also ran something called Hatworks Takeovers, which gave other kind of creative collective groups, organisations, and the opportunity to, use the space for a week and sort of be resident there and animate that space. At the end of that project, we published a report called Foundations for Growth, Creative Space Infrastructure in Dundee. And I suppose that report kind of recognised that we need city-wide partnerships and cross-sector partnerships to kind of deliver this long-term ambition of long-term space. And then we were really lucky to get funding in partnership with the University of Dundee through the AHRC Arts and Humanities Research Council Creative Communities programme. So for the past year, I've then kind of been trying to connect, I suppose, this on-the-ground work and being with communities in the room, activating spaces within Dundee city centre, with also kind of policy change and sort of national advocacy work. And yeah, the outcomes of that project will be a case study, also a podcast, and a policy paper. So I suppose one of the key themes that's come out of this, we are the only Scotland project in that piece of work, I should say. So although our activity is very much rooted in Dundee, we're keen to make sure that our case study and policy paper is quite reflective of conversations happening across Scotland. And as we've already said, it's like an exciting time with community wealth building kind of being developed in Scotland, and Scotland having this ambition to be the first nation to implement community wealth building on a national scale. And we think there's a real connection between creative spaces and community wealth building. We think that creative communities are actually already amazing demonstrators of community wealth building across all 5 pillars. Creative communities are very much embedded in their place. They're like investing locally, they're providing opportunities for local people, but they need the space to do that. And obviously one of the ambitions of community wealth building is to make space more accessible to communities. Would you like me to share some of the kind of policy recommendations that we've come up with?
Yeah, definitely. But something I'll just quickly say first is that you need to be absolutely congratulated, because you've done an incredibly difficult job of theoretical policy, which is fun to talk about, but then you're doing the work on the ground as well. And it's very much a question that we get is, oh, if this policy has been passed, why is it not happening? ? So I think you should absolutely be congratulated for being a fantastic example of here's the policy and here's it happening on the ground as well. So please do share your policy proposals with us.
Yeah, I suppose that kind of connection between grassroots and policy is something that we also we're trying to embed more and more in the other projects like Creative Dundee are doing as well. But it is quite a difficult balance to find, the time, I suppose, to do both of them. So yeah, our key findings from this kind of 9 months worth of work so far, we started by looking at the different creative space models that's out there, and there's quite a dominance since COVID in particular of temporary space models. There's quite a few organisations working with vacant space landlords to provide free space to creative communities. And although this is like welcomed and definitely has a place in kind of the ecosystem of creative spaces that we want to see, we also kind of mapped out where the wealth and assets are held within that model. And what we saw was that really landlords are the ones benefiting the most. They get to hold on to their asset, accumulate wealth with that asset, and also then receive like tax breaks, not have to pay as much business rates by working with a broker. That broker then receives money to kind of do that transaction. And then a temporary space provider comes in and sort of facilitates creative communities coming into that space. And they get that space for free. But ultimately, when we're thinking about community wealth building, it doesn't allow them to kind of invest in that space. Leases are super short and quite unpredictable. Yeah, they're not able to build assets and hold assets as a community. So we want to think about models and find ways to support models that, alongside this kind of meanwhile space initiatives, support longer term occupancy of spaces by creative communities. Public funding is leaking out of the creative economy through a lack of access to long-term space. So kind of the main funders within Scotland is Creative Scotland, so I will use them as an example, but really it's relevant to any kind of funder. If they're funding a creative organisation in any way, but for example through their multi-year funding programmes, Creative Dundee are lucky to be a multi-year funded organisation. If they are leasing a space that is owned by private landlords, ultimately a large chunk of that public funding is going straight out the door to that private landlord and isn't building anything for that creative community. Then we also found, speaking to folks on the ground in Dundee, but also through national kind of support organisations, that when considering how public assets are used, so publicly owned buildings, there's a requirement for local authorities to consider both the kind of economic impact of giving this space over to a community and also the social impacts of giving the space over. But there's not really a framework for the local authorities to use, to share with creative communities, to be able to articulate the social value that them occupying that space would bring. And the result of that is that, as you can imagine, the kind of economic impact and the economic value is actually dominant. And so I think what we found and feel that we need and had feedback on is kind of a social value framework that would help creative communities really broadly, articulate the social value that they would bring. And with community wealth building coming in Scotland, it feels like an opportunity to kind of align those alongside potentially other either local strategies, local plans, and also kind of national strategies like culture strategies as well. And then last one is, just recognising creative organisations as community anchors. So a lot of community wealth building kind of like structures at the moment are very much focused on anchor institutions, and there's very good reasons for that. They're the ones that kind of spend money, a lot of money locally, employ a lot of people. But we feel like creative and cultural organisations have a really important role to play in kind of connecting the communities with this community wealth building agenda. Again, it's similar to what I was saying about creative organisations. They're deeply rooted, they're often trusted by the local communities, and they're seen in their local communities. And so I think that they're really well placed to play that role. And ultimately just creative communities, I think, have the potential to help Scotland realise community wealth building kind of as demonstrators and connectors.
That's absolutely spot on. I mean, it's hard to disagree with any of it, really. Maybe that's just through my social enterprise tinted specs, though. But something that you kind of hit on there, I think, is trust, right? So we've spoke about this before, where we've had, during the pandemic, there was complete trust in communities by Scottish Government. And that seems to have kind of slightly gone backwards a little bit. So I'm cautiously optimistic, as always, that the Community Wealth Building Bill is a new opportunity for that trust to be not necessarily re-established, but to kind of just for government to step up and be like, actually, you guys know what you're doing. You're the experts in this area, you know. And I think that could play quite a huge part in the prevention agenda that's coming forward. So Scottish Government's dealing with quite a lot of money that they're not going to have over the next few parliamentary years. So I think there's going to be some investment into that prevention measures. So I think having that engagement within community and within creative communities, because you've got that constant back and forth of knowing who's who and what's going on. So I think it's almost invaluable, actually. You cannot put a financial cost onto that connection that you have in your local communities.
I think with the ambition for Scotland to develop the number of inclusive and democratic business models as well, that is another area that I think creative and cultural organisations really excel in demonstrating already. And charity, I find it really hard to sort of split, because everything Eilish has said could be applicable to social enterprises and charities as well, right? So I suppose we're trying to forge ahead with this work on the basis that it is applicable to the much broader third sector. So the democratic models that Scotland wants to realise is really fascinating in terms of community ownership, community shares. We've done a fair bit of work over the years in terms of how do you distribute grant funds well, and how do you not run a standard membership programme. So Creative Dundee has a supporters programme called AMPS, which is our way of people financially contributing to the organisation, but also benefiting from a number of events and networking sessions. But then also about 50% of the income that's generated goes into an annual community ideas fund, which then 2 or more AMPs come together and pitch ideas in a really lovely way. And then the AMPs have that kind of democratic vote of they all get a vote and they all decide who gets the cash. So this last year it was £2,500. And it's initiated some really interesting grassroots projects across the city that have gone on to be sustained longer term. And we're not alone in that, right? We know that third sector organisations across the country are creating these really innovative models. We've also run, Dundee Soups in the past, where it's a micro donation to then go forward into a community idea that will benefit the community. These ideas already exist all over the place, and we just need a mechanism to amplify that better as an organisation that uses that word all the time. But we need a way of collating that and really demonstrating what Scotland's already doing in that space. And that's what I'm really excited about in terms of democratic finance models and things. It's really hard to navigate right now, but I think we've got so many of the jigsaw pieces in place already. I feel quite excited about the times ahead, even though they're really challenging.
I think that's the exciting thing about kind of like challenging times though, right? Is that it kind of forces a hand almost as to be like, no, we have to go in a different direction because we've gone down this route before, didn't work. We've gone down that route before, didn't work. Maybe we should start listening to people who are having an impact on the ground because that is working, right? So it's quite nice. And again, I have that cautious optimism as well. It's like we see things seem to be falling into place, and like I suppose maybe the slight opposite of cautious optimistic is my pessimism of, everything seems to be going well. Oh no, something bad must be happening soon. But so far so good, honestly. And I think it's quite an exciting time too.
And I'd love to know your thoughts on the Community Wealth Building Act as well as it stands, because I think it's wonderful. And we can see that internationally people are really watching Scotland right now, which is very exciting as well. And I guess I wonder, does it go far enough to speak to that new economy that you're speaking about? Or is it just an adjustment to the current reality, and will time tell which direction we go in?
Big question. I like it though. I think, there's always that saying of nothing happens in politics and then everything happens in a week, right? And I see the Community Wealth Building Bill as a bit of a stepping stone towards that. So an organisation that we also work with is the Social Enterprise World Forum. And I've had colleagues in there get in touch about like, oh my God, the Community Wealth Building Bill. This is amazing. This is like life-changing. You guys are so incredibly lucky. And I think the impact of what the Community Wealth Building Bill could do is maybe not getting picked up in Scotland enough. And I think that's the responsibility for organisations like us at Social Enterprise Scotland to kind of take up that torch and to shout louder about this kind of thing. So we're planning to have a few events down the line to kind of talk more and to get people more aware of what's going on. Because I think a big part of the economy is people don't really engage with it at all. Like a lot of the time, the economy to people can just be somebody on the news pointing at a graph and the graph goes up or down. And you're like, good times it's gone up, or bad times it's gone down. But I think if people had a tangible attachment and ownership of certain parts of the economy, then they can kind of get a lot more engaged with it as well. So I think the Community Wealth Building Act that we now have is a stepping stone towards the correct direction that it's going. There's going to be some challenges around procurement, I think, over like kind of certain laws that are in to stop any sort of biases, which is, obviously important when it comes to kind of who's getting these taxpayer-funded contracts. But I think we're on the right direction. Duncan?
Yeah, I think there's a real awareness issue at the start here, to be honest, within Scotland. So I've seen so much stuff on social media internationally, which is saying, there's a revolution happening in Scotland with community wealth building. And it's like, is there? It's a brilliant step in the right direction. We're big supporters of it. But in terms of the public awareness, it's very low, to be honest. And I think the key word for all this, as always, we're always talking about is implementation. So you can have good legislation with a good consultation process, but it's what actually happens with that legislation when it leaves the doors of Parliament in our local communities. And that's really one of our top priorities this year, is to make sure that becomes a living, breathing reality in all urban and rural communities in Scotland as well. I think that's going to be one of our big challenges.
And it's something that we can't do without members like yourself, without you guys having the impact on the ground that you're doing, without collecting data, showing the impact that you have had. That makes our jobs so much easier when talking to kind of ministers, cabinet, civil servants, whoever it may be, to be like, no, like, listen, this isn't just a story that we're telling you. Here's all the evidence to back it up. This is how you can improve and actually implement community wealth building. I think optimistic times.
Yeah, so one of the most interesting things I find when speaking to social entrepreneurs is really that kind of personal journey, and I think this is just such a fascinating thing to hear. So, how did you kind of come upon the creative arts yourself? How did you, end up where you are just now? And what are your own kind of creative personal passions?
Yeah, so my background is in design. I didn't do particularly well at school, but I loved art basically, and so managed to get my way into art school. Did a course in design and craft, came back to Dundee, and then was like, what am I going to do? And managed to get a job in a third sector organisation who was supporting, it was actually a New Deal into work, which old people will remember, but it was designing a new programme that was supporting people who were kind of out of the workforce for a number of years back in. So I did that for many years, here and elsewhere. Did it a bit in Australia as well with people that had just come to the country. And so, yeah, my background is in trying to work out what people's motivations and needs are, and then trying to match that with resource, I think, is where I'm getting to with that. And I came back and worked for an innovation foundation called Nesta for 7 years, and was running their creative enterprise programs for creative graduates, basically, and for those that the system wasn't working for. So also older social entrepreneurs, which is hilarious looking back. I was in my 30s doing that, and that was just for social entrepreneurs aged 50 and over, which is still so young. But yeah, I did a lot of that kind of work, and then got a bit fed up, if I'm totally honest, with actually just working at that really early stage where you're given all the cash, or you were back in the day, you were given all that resource and support, and then people were just left to get on with it and run their businesses forevermore, and there was no network of support. And so I just started blogging in my spare time about cool things that were happening in Dundee. And then the rest, I guess, is history, but it's all rooted in the fact that I probably had that more rounded understanding, although when you're setting up a social enterprise at first, it never ever feels like that. But it's probably rooted in that understanding of communities on the ground in Dundee, but also my kind of passion for creativity as like instrumental in social progress. And I think increasingly, as the world turns more automatic and automated, we need to make sure that we're preserving what makes us human, and culture is that.
Yeah, so I came to Dundee as an 18-year-old to go to Duncan and College of Art and Design to study design. And yeah, I think unlike a lot of my fellow graduates, like I stayed in the city, partly because it felt like there was I had a little bit of a network here compared to going back up north where I'm from. And yeah, I think I could just see that there was things happening in Dundee and that there was a real kind of spirit of collaboration in the city. And so, yeah, alongside like a part-time job, like any kind of art school graduate, working in a sports shop, selling running shoes, printing football t-shirts, I was doing quite an array of freelance projects, which didn't really make any sense, but were just kind of self-initiated things with, yeah, people trying to just do good things in Dundee that it felt like good to collaborate with. And I would be going along to Creative Dundee's like Petra Kitchen Night, and yeah, that kind of kept me here, I guess, because like I say, there felt like energy in Dundee. And then over COVID, I was kind of really lucky to be on furlough and at home, and had the time to sort of look back on this sort of portfolio of projects that really didn't make any sense to me anyway. But as I say, they were all kind of self-initiated. And so there must have been a reason that I'd wanted to do all of them. I thought about the kind of key themes that I wanted to work around, and I studied interior environmental design at undergrad level. So I kind of had space as a core thing, but I didn't want to be in a studio kind of designing swish spaces for people with lots of money. I wanted to be working with communities and be very much on the ground and kind of sharing what I know with communities so that they can have visions of the future themselves. And I then went to do my master's in urban design. And then at the same time, a project came up that Creative Dundee were running also with university, called Dandelion, and that was a project where there was 13 new community gardens being built around Scotland. And so it was kind of the four things that I decided I wanted. I wanted design spaces with communities, a kind of sustainable aspect, future thinking aspect of it, and also food, because I'm really foodie. And I didn't really expect a project to come up that like ticked all four. I was kind of like, each project from now on should tick at least two of these boxes so I could become a bit more focused. But yeah, then this project came up, and so that's how I started working with Creative Dundee. And thankfully, Gillian kept me, and so I'm still here as a creative producer, which I feel like that was a job I didn't even know existed when I was studying. And that's also an interesting thing about kind of creative journeys. You don't know where you're going to end up, but it all makes sense now.
Brilliant. And just to ask as well, if you had to choose one creative activity, what's your number one go-to choice? Is that a tough question?
It's a very tough question. That's brutal.
I think one thing that's quite interesting for some people, I am one of these people that works in the creative industries, is that it feels very much like your personal life and your personal passions and the things you care about bleed into your work. And in a way, that's a wonderful thing. But the thing that doesn't translate for me is like remembering to do creative stuff just for myself and my own well-being. So yeah, I'm not like great at doing that.
Getting better, room to improve. But
Yeah,
I think I'm probably pretty similar. I think you're speaking to the two people that are probably most into design practice within our small team. I should say we're 5 people, and the others are Freya, Claire, and Jen. And yeah, Eilish and I are from design backgrounds, so we're probably the ones that want to create like toolkits and templates and, you know, post-it notes all over the place, and that's our happy place. Is that fair to say?
yeah,
Is so in terms of creative practice, it's probably looking at everything quite systemically, like looking at the big picture, and then like that's. I know your geek thing is policy, and I'm pretty much there as well, but. Yeah, it's kind of like mapping systems and things is certainly for me my hobby.
yeah. My outlet is just planning holidays like 5 years in advance that I don't know if I can afford.
I hear that. Good one.
But in on the topic of kind of fairness, Duncan, can you answer your own question? Because it was pretty brutal to throw them under the bus without you having a retort of your own.
Oh, come on. Can we edit this bit out, though?
No, absolutely not.
Creativity, I don't know. I don't think I'm creative enough. I think that's my problem as well. I need to get more creative. But writing, yeah, I'm a frustrated writer, so
There you go. See?
less frustrated these days. But yeah.
Yeah. And I have
Well,
expert.
you need to go into Dundee.
I get some
You need to come
inspiration.
to Dundee and live the
Yeah.
dream here. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Andy, what about you?
Oh, see, I was just about to say I've expertly segued myself out of that question, but you've caught me there. So I have a lot of friends in my life who really enjoy like knitting and crocheting, which is something that I'm borderline allergic to. Like I just can't seem to pick it up at all. Like I've tried and it just does not work for me. But something that we do is like we do crafty movie nights where we'll chuck on a film that's maybe something that one of us hasn't seen before and like we want to enjoy it, and then you kind of get stuck in with a craft at the same time. So I'm a big Lego guy, and I never used to like to draw when I was younger, but like it's kind of something that I'm slowly bringing back into as well. They are not good, I must emphasize. They are very bad, but it's the expression and doing it that's the important
the
part, right?
process, the relaxation, the therapy behind it. Yeah, it's important.
Huge bonuses to creativity.
Yeah, there's no judgment. Everyone's creative, and that's our big thing. And that's the thing, is that you can just immerse yourself in any kind of activity. I feel like a walking advert for Dundee at the moment, but like, you know, any night of the week you can go and be part of an open mic night or a writing workshop or, you know, some brilliant zine making sessions. The list goes on.
Yeah.
You know, I was just going to say, I think there is this thing that we speak about often in Creative Dundee, is that sometimes culture is still seen as elite or a luxury item or for only a few people. But we know that if you go to Ardler Community Centre or any of the community centres in Dundee, there are like amazing cultural activities going on throughout the week. And so, yeah, our whole thing at Creative Dundee is that, yeah, there's not one specific type of creative activity or cultural activity. It's just this amazing mix that is really diverse and reaches people in all different places and all parts of our community. Everyone's got their own culture, right? And COVID really helped us figure that out. It's just finding the time to keep it up.
So obviously we were going to be up in Dundee in June for our summit, but if for those who are excited about hearing this, excited about what's hearing on Dundee, what's next for Dundee? What's next for Creative Dundee?
Well, we're excited to be attending as well when you're in Dundee. So what's next for Creative Dundee? Well, that's a good question to ask us right now. After 10 years and founding the blog for many years before that, I'm actually going to stand back from the organisation, which is very exciting and a bit nerve-wracking as well. But I think it's only fair to kind of step aside from things that you've set up. Like, I don't want to keep running Creative Dundee forever and ever more. And I sort of need to peel back the layers and figure out what I'm all about next. I suspect it will be rooted in a social purpose organisation, either helping set another one up. So if anybody's got any ideas, then I'm very open to that. But yeah, I'll be standing down from the organisation later this year. And we're excited to be moving to a distributed leadership model with our brilliant 4-person team who are very capable. And I'm just delighted that our board are really supportive of it and that have wanted to ensure that our team are very much rooted in the architecture of what next. Because I think distributed leadership models are still reasonably new, certainly in Scotland. And there are a few cultural organisations that we're looking to for advice and support in how we move forward with that. But I think it is the next step in Creative Dundee's own inclusive and democratic business model journey. So yes, we're all excited.
Yeah, I think as Gillian mentioned, we've spoken to some other creative organisations that have kind of made this shift, and they've kind of reflected back to us. It's always like an interesting time when like a founder of an organisation moves on. But yeah, as sad as we are to see Gillian go and like the massive like gap she will leave, it's also feels very Creative Dundee, and it's an exciting opportunity, to explore like a new model. And I think that amongst the rest of the team, Freya, Claire, Jen, and myself, we're just we there's a kind of trust there that we've all built amongst the 5 of us, and we're on a journey with it. We don't necessarily know what it's going to look like in the end, but yeah, it feels an exciting time to be part of Creative Dundee and an exciting opportunity for all of us.
Just very quickly, for people who might not know, what does that kind of shared model look like?
I mean, that's something we're definitely still figuring out. And yeah, I think the way that we're approaching it anyway is not just taking Gillian's role and kind of distributing it like amongst ourselves. And we keep using the analogy of just like dealing the cards of like all the things that Gillian does, but kind of trying to think quite deeply about where each of our skills lie, because we all have different skills, and we think about that a lot anyway as an organisation. And so we're trying to think how we do that in ways that works with what our skill set is, but also working in collaboration a little bit more. And the way that our projects work, sometimes you can kind of be off leading your own projects, and we're really keen to make sure that the kind of running of the organisation at the kind of heart of all that is very much kind of shared. So yeah, still to be decided, but it's an exciting process for sure.
And I'm sure a lot of people might have questions about that or might be inspired to do for something very similar. So is there a way to keep in touch with Creative Dundee? How best to do that?
Yeah, so we're on all the social channels. Please follow us there. And we also have a monthly news mail out, which is totally free to subscribe to. And we collate the lots of events and activities that are happening right across Dundee. So it's not just Creative Dundee's events and beyond Dundee's boundaries. And I think, there's things like our Petracucha night, which we've not really touched on, but is an annual night that we hold in November, where like 500 people come to Dundee Rep Theatre and hear from like incredibly diverse speakers. It's a really democratic platform. It's very Dundee. It's very Creative Dundee. So please come along to that. And also we will have exhibition at Scottish Parliament September, October time, yet to be confirmed, of our fabric programme, which has been a project about mental health and young people and creative practitioners and mental health practitioners coming together to think what next for mental health and young people and pathways through that. So, yeah, keep in touch, please.
Absolutely, and we will, of course. It was lovely speaking to you guys today. Thanks so much for having the time to come chat to us. I really do appreciate that. Thanks for listening, folks. This has been Building Wealth, Building Community, Social Enterprise Scotland podcast with me, Andy Patterson, and Duncan Thorpe. If you need to get in touch at any time about all things social enterprise, please do visit socialenterprise.scot. Goodbye for now.